Hello there and welcome to a little bit of a hobby tutorial. I'm Captain Jack Gumption and we're going to be making our own texture pastes. So as you can see, as it stands at the moment, there are a number of bases in front of us, all made using my own homemade texture paste. It's much like what you can get from Games Workshop or Vallejo or AK Interactive, except it's more customizable for what you personally need, and it's also a little bit cheaper, but less convenient. So we're going to go through it step by step how you go to make it. But first, we'll kind of have a look at what we're looking at in its final form, and also some little caveats with the homemade stuff over the shop bought stuff. So in true Blue Peter style, here's some I made earlier. Now this one here is kind of like a really rocky, deserty textured colour. It's got a lot of sand, it's got a lot of rocking. It's a little bit hard to apply, but it's good for really rocky desert stuff. Maybe not a full base, but like little patches of rocks here and there. It's basically, this one is made from this paste. If you don't add in as much rocks, just get that into focus, it kind of looks like this. This is where I was sort of coming across as customizable. And then this one, this sloppity mess, is basically a kind of battlefield churn, I call it. It's got some rocks in it, it's got a bit of liching in it as well to kind of give some weedy, rooty texture to it, and some sand to kind of give it that mud. Now, this is where our first caveat comes in, because as you can see, this one in particular at the minute looks a little bit sloppy. That's because they do require quite a bit of mixing in order to kind of make them stay as you want. The sand does settle down to the bottom, and the stones settle down to the bottom. The water and the glue does come to the top. So they do require a big mix compared to your kind of shop bought stuff. These tend to separate, or at least mine do anyway. But apart from that, they're pretty good. And like I said, I really like making my own because I get to make something out of the pot which is essentially usable to my own scenic bases, and things like that. So we'll move on to his ingredients, and we'll just kind of quickly talk about what you'd need to make your own bases, and then I'll very quickly show you how to make it. It's going to take me longer to record this video than it is to actually make the texture paste. So it is a really good, quick alternative. You can make it in whatever batch sizes you want. I'm doing a lot of basing at the minute, so I've got some quite big tubs. If you save your old GW pots or something like that, you could also make a small batch, put it in there so it don't go dry, or you could make it as and when you need it, in a little dish or a little pallet. So let's have a look at our ingredients. So in front of you here is basically everything you would need to make your own texture paste, or a very simple sandy texture base. So for these ones, what I'm wanting to make is, because I have a Night Lancer base to do and Angron's base to do, as well as some other chaosy, worldy kind of projects, and they're all kind of more lava based. Now, a really good texture paint is Vallejo's, I think it's called Black Lava. It's got some almost crushed grass reflective pieces to it, and you can kind of sculpt it as well. It makes some really nice hard peaks. But I want to make my own because it's quicker, it's easier, and it's cheaper mainly. So these are his ingredients. You're going to need some kind of PVA style glue. So I've got a couple here. I've got some Hobby World PVA glue, non-toxic, basically kids non-toxic PVA glue from either B&M or Home Improvements or whatever home bargains shop it is. I bought this several years ago. I still haven't got through it. It was $1.99 at the time. You can pick this sort of stuff up for cheap. And it's nice and easy. Alternatively, if you do a lot of hobbying and crafting and stuff like that, you've probably got some Mod Podge kicking around. Mod Podge comes in a variety of different types: mattes, gloss, sparkly, you name it, they kind of do it. So yeah, you need a PVA type of glue. Now, the thing I've found with the two different types, Mod Podge is slightly better in the way it seems to dry quicker. PVA glue, or at least this PVA glue, does take a lot longer to dry if you just leave it to dry. But the caveat with that is, where I do my hobby, it is very cold. This time of year it's quite damp as well, because it's essentially a stable. So yeah, bear that in mind. If you are going to go out and buy it, if you've got the money, I would go with the Mod Podge. Mod Podge is quite expensive compared to cheap PVA glue. You also don't need to buy it in this kind of like sizes. They do small ones. You don't need a massive amount depending on how much you want to do. You'll need a sealable tub if you're wanting to keep it. So an airtight one, so it won't let any moisture out. The air won't get to it to dry it out. You'll need some form of medium. For this one, I have some sand, which has got some little gravel in it. So this is a mix of builder's sands, which had quite large coarse parts in it and little stones and stuff like that. I've just basically run it through a sieve into that pot, so it's going to be a little bit smoother, because I kind of want a smoother finish for this. If you want really rocky, you put rocks in. If you want it to be kind of in between, go for a medium rock. If you want to chuck some lichen in, like I've said in the past, chuck some lichen in. Make sure you chop it up and grind it up, but it kind of adds different textures depending on what you're wanting to do. So if you want in an earthy, muddy, kind of jungly base, then chuck some lichen in, use some fine sand, mix it all together with some brown paint. If you want in a kind of concrete textured look, go for some really fine grained sand. If you want in some rocky desert, some fine grained sand with some rocks. It's that simple. Basically, think about what you want to achieve with your basing paste, and then mix it with the right mediums. And by mediums, I mean such as like sand, tree bark, whatever basically you're wanting to chuck in. And then we've got paint, as I've mentioned. These paints, these artistic cheap paints, again, these are dirt cheap to get, are the best ones. But if you don't want to go out and kind of like fill your hobby space up with lots of different mediums you're never going to use all that often, you can use such as hobby paint. So a couple of examples on here. I've got a couple of different Vallejo ones, as well as some really old Humbrol stuff I used to do when I used to do like normal modelling kits. The sand-based ones are made using Humbrol number 93, I think, which is a desert khaki one. They're your main ingredient, and then the other ingredient, which does help a lot. Actually, it is an essential ingredient. If you look in the background there, you can see a rather dirty-looking Boba Fett mug. That has got old paint water in. Old paint water is perfect for this, and we'll show you what you do with your water to kind of like get it all mixed up and stuff like that. So, quick list then. You will need some PVA glue or PVA type of glue. Mod Podge, PVA glue. For the purposes of this, it is pretty much all the same. You will need some paint to colour it. If you don't want to colour it, because you can paint over these afterwards, you don't need the paint. It's not essential. It just helps if you've got a set colour in mind. It makes it more efficient when you're doing your hobby. You'll need some form of medium, such as sand, and you will need some water. You can use clean water, or you can use old dirty paint water. It doesn't matter. Just be aware, really, really old paint water may affect your colour of your final product when you mix it together, because essentially it's diluted paint. So, without further ado, let's start mixing and let's start getting this made. Okay, so I've got my core ingredients that I'm going to use for making my texture paste. So let's begin. It's very, very simple. Basically, first of all, you take your good old PVA glue or Mod Podge or whatever equivalent you're using, and you give a good old splurge. There we go. Now, obviously, I'm trying not to knock the camera and things like that as it stands at the moment, whilst also not making a mess. So it should be easier for you at home. As you can see, this PVA glue is very old. It's kind of a little bit stringing past it, but it'll do for what we're doing here. So we've got a lovely, lovely big dollop of PVA, and then I'm going to tip in my medium, my sand. I'm going to tip it all in, just enough to get it started, and then I'm going to give it a good old mix. And we're looking for a chewing gum consistency to start off with. Make sure it's all mixed in. And just to kind of show, you can make this from pretty much anything. This PVA glue is not ideal, but I've got every confidence once we're done it'll work. So if we look at this, as you can see, it's quite gritty. It's got, like, you can see the grit in it. It's going to need a little bit more. So I like to make sure all my sanding is in first, so I can see, because this will sand out very well against the PVA glue. I'm just going to put a little bit more. There's no exact measurements. There's no precise science to this. It's just basically whatever consistency you're looking for. This, like I said, is basically a volcanic sand, lava kind of thing that we're after. It needs to be quite flat, because the design for this is minis is going to be pinned through it, so something too rocky, the feet won't sit flush, or it'll be hard, or you're picking out rocks and stuff like this. This is my, I'm making this for a specific purpose, which is the brilliant thing when you're making your own. You can do it. If I need to add more rocks in, this is essentially a glue paste. I can add rocks and things like that to it at any point. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more sand. You get a bit more in. Oop. And now it's starting to go a bit like chewing gum. So that's a sign that it's starting to get a little bit thick. The resistance on it as well is quite thick, which is an ideal point to stop. You can get this stuff so you can pretty much sculpt it in a way. The runnier it is, the flatter it'll level out. The kind of thicker it is, the more medium you've got in, the more it'll stand straight. Now, if you add too much sand in, you can add water in, which will thin it down. Also, bearing in mind, when we add as paint in, that will loosen this up. But that, at the minute, is pretty much perfect. So we're going to take our black cheap paint. This probably came from the works or somewhere like this. Again, this is really old. It's probably a good few years old, so it's past it. I only want it for the colour. The consistency or its usability doesn't matter, as long as it makes it black. Because this is white, essentially PVA glue is white, it will be grey. to start off with. Let me just give this a quick shake. Okay, so moderation is key, so I'm going to add a little dollop. Make sure I don't spill it everywhere. And there we go. So this is starting to look very, very nice. And I need to make sure I've got enough kind of like paint and I've given it enough of a mix that it's going to be consistent all the way through, because as you can sometimes see as it's coming through, sometimes we're getting still some light bits of sand and PVA. Look at that, that is pretty much perfect for what I need. It's black, it's gritty, and yeah, it's a sand-based texture similar to what you would get from Vallejo or little tub of GW stuff. So that is it. In an ideal world, you'll have mixed it right first time like I've done there, and everything will work out perfect as it has. But what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show people that it can go wrong and there's always a way to fix it. I'm going to deliberately make it too thick, too stodgy, and we're going to basically just tip all this sand in. So if you've managed to get it to this level, you're happy with it, you can stop there. Well done, you've made your own texture paint. But if it all goes wrong, which it may do because accidents happen, oh no, I've slipped. Oh, it's far too much sand in there. Yeah, so it's too thick now. Look at that. It's turning into I don't even know how we would describe that. It's very thick sand. It's literally sand. That's no good. It won't stop. It won't stick in its current format. It's all dried out. Actually, to be fair, that kind of would still work, but it might not stick as well as you want. Let me just get a base. Right, so we're back. This is just these is what I use for little tester bases. It's essentially a NDF insert from a paint pot holder I used to have, but it will work. So this to me now is no good. It's too sandy. Look, won't really, unless I proper smush it on, it doesn't stick anymore. Well, that's fine. There's a couple of things we can do to rectify that. We'll make sure we mix all the sand in. So there's a couple of things we can do. It's so thick, it's actually bending this little plastic stirrer that I've got. We can add more paint. More paint will make it more liquidy. We can add more glue. More glue would make it sticky and kind of liquidy, or we can just take some water. Now I am opting to use, as he tries not to change this, the dirtiest paint water you may have ever seen. Sadly this is not as dirty as sometimes my paint water gets, but it's due for a change. Now I'm going to take this abyssal brown liquid and I'm just going to add in a tiny bit. You don't need much, just enough to get it in, and it's already kind of like becoming more pliable, more workable. So that is already kind of like more gloopy with a good mix. And you can always put the lid back on your tub and give it a shake. Just be careful it doesn't kind of thingy pop off and go flying. Right, so quick base test. There we go. So that's already more sticky. Look at that. As you might be able to pick out, I don't know how good because I'm still setting everything up, lighting. It's turned a bit more brown. That's because we've added more sand in, and it's kind of changed the colour of the paint, so that's more muddy. So what all I'd do here is basically add some more black paint in, which will make it more black. So let's do that now. Big liberal dollop. Also, with the water being quite brown, that'll make it alter the colour as well, because as I said at the beginning of the video, dirty paint water is essentially a really horrible cheap wash, because it's all the excess of paint off your brushes and stuff like that. Still a bit more black, please. Lovely sound effects. So get that mixed in, and then we'll have a nice jet black, or black as it can get, textured paste. So what I'll do now is I'll finish mixing this up. I'll get it applied to a base so we can kind of see that. Hopefully this has all come out in focus and stuff like that. I am still working on camera setups and angles and stuff like that at the moment, but yeah, I'll get this fully mixed up and then I'll get it applied to some bases. We'll get some shots of it wet as it's first been applied. We'll use this old one as well, and then we'll get some shots of it dry. When it comes to drying times, these do take a long time to dry, a lot longer than your shop bought stuff. But there's a couple of things you can do, but be careful. You can use a hairdryer to dry it out. If you use a hairdryer and you're not careful and you put it on too thick, what you'll find is the top layer hardens and it sets, but the bottom layer stays wet, and sometimes that will take even longer to dry because basically the air can't get to it and things like that. Or when you come to painting it, put your models on, what you might find is you put it down, it'll pierce that layer, and basically it'll come, the wet glue, paint and gravel will basically split out on it. Can go on your models and ruin them. So yeah, so I'll just get these on a base now, and then we can have a look at the finished product. So we've got this mixed up now. This was his first one, the slightly browny one. This is our darker one. What I'll do is, another thing you can do with these bases when you've got a big tub like this, which is quite useful, and this is how I'm going to apply it just now. It's going to require dirty fingers. A sane person, or a person that doesn't want to be covered in glue and paint, would basically put some sort of blue tack on the end of there, but I seem to be lacking some blue tack at the minute. Oh, tell a lie, found some. So what you can do with this stuff is you can dip it there you go. Looks a bit like a swirly poo, but there you go. It sometimes gives you some slightly more variety, and we can always scrape some off. So yeah, and as you can see, this is kind of sculptable with how it's turned out as well. So you have to keep playing with it and stuff like that to get it to stay in your troughs. But yeah, so what we'll do, this is going to take a long while to dry. I'll put up some pictures now of the finished bases. I'll I'll let one naturally dry. I'll dry one with a hairdryer, and that one's just as test piece sort of thing. And on the video we'll put up some times as well of how long it took to dry naturally opposed to hairdryer and stuff like that. Well, that is essentially how you make your own texture paste for your own modelling projects. This sort of method as well is perfect for if you're doing a diorama board, if you're wanting to do kind of like a armies on parade style thing. If you want a fully textured surface and you want something that is unique to you, it can get very expensive if you're buying the shop bought stuff. If you do it this way, you can make a lot. I've still got 2/3 of this PVA glue left. I've used Mod Podge. I've still got half a tub of Mod Podge left. These craft paints last forever, so it's a really good way to kind of give yourself something a bit unique for your bases. It's some new skills to learn, and yeah, save yourself some money at the end of the day. I'm not saying don't buy the shop bought stuff, because the shop bought stuff at the end of the day is better than this, because they've got the factories, they've got the perfect measurements and stuff like that. But this is good, and we can paint over these things as well and make it well. And another kind of final tip: make sure you put your lids back on. Make sure that they are nice and sealed. That way, it's going to be fresher for longer. And write your recipes on the front. So this is Rocky Desert, and I've written on here, I've got PVA, sand, coarse sand, rocks, 93 Humbrol and water. So I know exactly how to make this again. If you want to be really kind of particular about it, measure out your paints, use pipettes and things like that. But yeah, other than that, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learnt something new. I've been Captain Jack Gumption, and until next time.